Welcome to the Unscripted Journey podcast. I'm your host, Cynthia Schoen. Around here, we believe in living life on purpose, not by permission. Each week, we'll talk real growth, fresh starts, and bold steps to create a life that's true to you. So grab your coffee, get comfy, and let's take this journey together. Welcome back to the Unscripted Journey, my friends. Let me ask you a question. Have you ever felt God pulling you towards something new? But the very moment that you tried to step forward, you realized you couldn't do it without letting go of what's familiar? I think a lot of us have had a situation similar to this, where we have had to make a decision, but in order to make that decision, we have to let go of what's comfortable. I want to tell you that this episode is for anyone standing in that in-between space. Trusting God, but struggling to release what's safe. Let's face it, we all like to feel secure. We all like the familiar. And it's much easier to lead a life that is familiar instead of one that is filled with unknowns. I was going through my notes and I came across this quote that I don't know, somebody must have said it because I wrote it down. And it said that pleasing God often means disappointing people. Now, I want you to let that sit for a second and meditate on that. And think about it. That hit me hard when I saw that quote again because it's true. Obedience often requires misunderstood moves. People not understanding why you're doing things. Even you sometimes not understanding why you're taking certain steps. And that's all part of the faith walk. That's all part of trusting God. That's all part of sometimes taking that leap of faith that you've been wanting to take without knowing all of the answers. I think there's often a tug of war between faith and comfort. We like to be in that comfort zone. We don't sometimes like the feathers to be ruffled in our own lives. So we like comfort. We'll choose that over faith sometimes. And I am currently in that situation. I'm in a season of transition, which is requiring that me and my husband have a lot of faith, number one, and where the obedience that goes behind that faith is requiring me to walk away from something good, but not necessarily God's best. So let me just explain a little bit right now of what's happening in my life. And then I think once I've completely gone through this transition, we'll talk a little bit about it again. You may not know this, but my husband and I used to pastor a church, and after almost 5 years, we felt that it was time to close the doors to that church. We felt that God was leading us into something. We didn't know what it was. When we made the transition and we made that decision, I should say, that's leading to this transition in the last year, a lot of people didn't understand why we were making that decision. And even us, we struggled with it because pastoring the church, that was what we wanted. That's where our heart was. But there was something that was tugging at us. We knew that God had something different, something more for us. So a lot of people questioned why we closed the church. Why are we doing this? A lot of people were thinking about themselves. They really didn't care about what God was saying to us, even if we tried to explain it. They couldn't understand it. And currently, a year later, we are in a transition period where we're going to be moving out of state. I have found and taken a job in another state, and currently I have a fantastic job. I love my job. I love the company that I work for. I love my coworkers. We're friends. We laugh. We share our personal stories. But with that being said, I knew that there was a transition period that was coming to our lives and that we were making kind of decisions in the background to start something new in our lives because we really felt God was leading us to that, which led to me looking for a job out of state. And now here we are. And we're in the process of that transition phase where we will be moving. And a lot of people don't understand that. They really, really don't. And sometimes fear and people's opinions or the desire to make sense of things can keep us stuck. And I've gone through all those emotions like, oh my goodness, what am I leaving behind? Am I making a mistake? What if it doesn't work out? I'm leaving my kids behind. And when I say kids, my kids are young adults, but to me, they'll always just be my kids. But all those things, familiarity, the route to work, my job, my coworkers, what I do from 9 to 5, the life my husband and I have had here in this state for all of our lives, basically. So all of those things have gone through my head. But sometimes the hardest part when you're in a transition season and you're trying to go into your next thing isn't sometimes always just trusting God. It's being okay with people not understanding why you said yes to Him to begin with. Not everyone's going to understand that. And that's sometimes even harder than just trusting God, because Tim and I are faith-filled people, right? We trust that God is moving us. We trust that He is unfolding every single detail of this next season of our lives. And He's turning the page and writing the rest of it. And well, I should say He's always had it written. Now we're turning the page and we are stepping out in obedience. And obedience is not blind following, okay? It really is trusting God enough to move even when the map isn't clear. And we knew that. When we closed the church, we knew something else was coming our way, but we didn't know what it was. And if you look at the Bible, it's filled with stories of people who took a faith walk, a faith step, who jumped, who leaped, because God called them to something else. Abraham is a big example, leaving everything familiar. Or even think about Peter stepping out of the boat onto water that it just didn't make sense. And even the other disciples didn't even realize, hey, what the heck is he doing? This doesn't make sense how he could be doing that. But that is what faith is all about, faith and obedience. And obedience is rarely convenient or logical. But it is often where faith is proven, when you decide to obey what God has placed in your heart, the calling that He has placed in your life. Man, it has to be full of faith. It goes hand in hand. And I want to encourage you to stop over-explaining your decisions to people who aren't meant to understand your calling. Your calling is your calling. And sometimes, it's going to be hard, but you've got to get it together. Again, I'm going through all the emotions. I'm doing a lot in a very short period of time. I have to be in my job in a few more weeks. And we have had a condo to sell and things to do and coordinate a move. And it has not been easy. And I am stressing out. But I'm still trusting and believing God. And you know what is so good about God? Can I just say this right now? I just want to say what is so good about God is that even when we say we have faith and we're trusting, even as human beings, when we have a little bit of doubt, He still shows up, and He still shows up as faithful, because that's who He is. That's what He does. But I want to say that you cannot continue holding on to the old things that are blocking you. You got to make space for the new. You can't receive what's next if your hands are full of what was, because once we decide to take that step of obedience and obey God and take a leap of faith, we have to let go of what is current, because that's going to be our past. We have to let that go in order to prepare for what is coming, the future, the now, even the now. My goodness, let it go. And practically letting go looks differently. It's releasing a job. and a life. That's me right now. Or maybe it's an identity that once fit, but now limits your growth. I've talked a lot about this, right? This unscripted journey is about evolving. Maybe it's something new, even when it feels uncertain. It's just brand new and you don't really know what it is. And sometimes it's just choosing peace over people pleasing, right? Let's stop pleasing people. I've personally learned to release control and trust God. And the obedience always leads to purpose, even when it doesn't make sense. It always will. If you follow God's path, if you decide you're not looking to the right, you're not looking to the left, you're going to follow, you're going to keep on going no matter when it looks like it's not working out. Remember, we can't see the whole picture and God can. Remember when I said pleasing God often means disappointing people? See, the thing is, when you think about that quote, not everyone is supposed to get it. Because your calling isn't a conference call. You're not here to, confer with people or let them in on what plans God has for your life. Your job is to pray, your job is to have faith, and your job is to obey. And when you share that with people, regardless of whether they get it or not, it's not up to them. But I will tell you, there is an emotional side to this. And you need to learn how to handle misunderstanding without bitterness or guilt, because some people will not get it. And what I'm learning through my own process is that I have to allow other people, in my case, family members, coworkers, a boss, whomever, who doesn't really understand, we have to let them process the decision that we're making and the calling that we are following. We have to let them process it in their own way, in their own time. Our job is just to be obedient. And if God is calling you to something new, don't let fear of losing what's familiar hold you back. You're not losing. You are making room for the new. You are expanding your tent pegs. You are going forward and you are saying, I am ready. I am giving up what's familiar and I'm making room for the greater things that God has for me and in my life for right now, for this next season that I'm stepping into. I always like to ask you a reflective question. And I want to ask you, what's one thing God might be asking you to release so that He can lead you into what's next? Maybe there's something you've been praying for. God, send me somewhere new. God, give me a new job. God, help me with my next decision. What is He calling you to? What do you need to let go of in order to make room to catch the new that God has for you? And I want to remind you that obedience may cost comfort. It may cost you what you are familiar with, but it will always lead to peace. And peace is priceless no matter what. Following God's plan and purpose for your life, that takes precedence. That is priority, my friends. And I don't want you to ever forget that. So let go of what's familiar. Let go of what's in your hands. Let's stop having such a tight grip, because when you can't let go, God cannot work. God cannot show you. So just like us, when we were closing our church, we had to close it even when people didn't understand. I'm going to tell you, people even talked about us. People that we respected, just because they didn't understand it, and they didn't agree with it because they were thinking about themselves, even then, that hurt. That was hard. But we had to be obedient to God. And that is more important. And I want you today to choose faith and obedience over comfort. Well, that's it for today, for this episode. I want to thank you for listening, and I am so grateful for you, my friends. And I want to invite you to share this episode with someone who's struggling to let go and someone who needs to hear words of encouragement in this next season of their life. All right, until next time, We'll see you soon. Thanks so much for listening to the Unscripted Journey podcast. If today's episode lit a spark in you, keep that momentum going with the Unscripted Journey Reflection Journal. It's a guided space to help you tune in, take action, and start living life on your terms. It's available now on Amazon. Just click the link in the episode notes. And don't forget, I've got free resources waiting for you over at CynthiaSchoen.com to support your growth between episodes. Until next time, live free and stay unscripted.